Welcome. Buenas tardes y bienvenidos a todos. It is my honor to be hosting all of you from around the world. Thank you for joining us. This event is part of local and global conversations as we recognize the importance of the intersection of possibilities and challenges and opportunities that Fulbright offers in Hispanic serving institutions. We have the privilege of having Dr. Goodman as our distinguished guest and discussant, and Dr. John Bader, who will be giving closing remarks. We have an excellent panel of experts and Dr. David Schwarzer as our moderator. This event will be recorded, and please remember that as an attendee, you are in listen-only mode and can click the Q&A button to type and submit questions, comments for reply during the Q&A part of the webinar. It is my pleasure and privilege to introduce you to Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs, Dr. Willard Gingrich.
Hello, everyone. I'm not sure if I'm on the screen. It's my delight to welcome all the participants, national and international, to this first Fulbright Forum for Montclair State, part of the ongoing commitment which Montclair has had for a long time with the Fulbright program and with the many other programs of the Institute for International Education. And we're very delighted and pleased that Dr. Alan Goodman could be in attendance to be part of this program with us. I'm going to take just a quick moment to introduce him, and then we'll turn it back over to Dr. Schwarzer for the introduction of the panel. Anyone who has paid any attention to international education needs no introduction to Dr. Alan Goodman. We all know, as the 6th president of the Institute for International Education, which just marked its centennial in 2019, he has been an unstoppable force for the promotion of education as an agency of international understanding and goodwill. And he's been extraordinarily successful at that, opening educational opportunities in nations that were fraught with tension, with the United States, into Vietnam, into Iran, and Cuba. He's led many opening opportunities where education opened the way to further opportunities for diplomacy and conversation. The Fulbright program is only one of some 200 corporate and government and privately sponsored programs that IIE is involved in. Montclair State has also been involved in the Scholar Rescue Program, which we've been very pleased to support, and the Artist Rescue Program as well, more recently. Dr. Goodman is a member of the Council of Foreign Relations. He serves as on the Council of Higher Education Accreditation International Quality Group Advisory Council. He earned his PhD from Harvard. He has been the recipient of honorary degrees from Canadian, European, Japanese, UK, and many US universities. His work has been decorated for promoting educational exchange and scholar rescue by the governments of France, Germany, and Norway. And he received the first Gilbert Medal from the Universitas 21 organization. And before joining IIE, he had an academic career as executive dean of the School of Foreign Service and professor at Georgetown. His books have been published by Princeton, Harvard, and Yale, and he has served at the Department of State and Central Intelligence Agency. So we are certainly delighted to have Dr. Goodman as our participant today. And I will just conclude my introduction by saying, if there were any real justice in the merit appointment of our government officials, Dr. Goodman would have been our Secretary of State long since, and certainly should be our Secretary of State now. In any case, we're delighted to welcome him and welcome all the panelists and all the participants for this distinguished discussion. Thank you. And David, over to you to introduce the panelists.
First of all, I would like to introduce, thank you, Willard, Dr. John Bader. He's the Executive Fulbright Association, the Executive Director of the Fulbright Association. This association that extends Fulbright programs into a lifelong experience for US alumni through lifelong learning, collaborative networking, and service projects at home and abroad. He's a Fulbright alumni himself from India. He has coached 114 Fulbright recipients at Johns Hopkins University, where he served also in several deanships, including Associate Dean for Academic Affairs. He's going to be our final discussant. Closing remarks, sorry. So now to the panelists. I think that we are having some trouble with our panelist from Argentina, Norma Gonzalez, but she's there. Marilyn, if you can send her the link, she's asking for that. Sorry to do that through the webinar, but that's the best way that I can do. Dr. Norma Gonzalez, she's the Executive Director and the Fulbright Commissioner of Argentina. Dr. Melissa Fitch is the University Distinguished Professor of Latin American Cultural Studies at the University of Arizona, a big, predominantly Hispanic serving institution in this country, and Ms. Athena Fuley, Fulbright Scholar Program Outreach and Recruitment Manager from the Institute of International Education. The panel is going to have, first of all, we are going to talk a little bit about Fulbright programs. As you know, we have US students coming and going to this country and as part of the Fulbright, and we have also US scholars. So there are two populations, students and scholars, students coming to this country and students going abroad, and the same with scholars coming to this country and scholars from this country going abroad. Clearly, there's much more nuance to that, but it's just to give some kind of sense of what are the Fulbright programs. And what we are looking here is how the Fulbright programs can be catalysts for internationalization efforts in general, and in particular with some related particularly to Hispanic serving institutions. So I thought it would be important to talk 1 minute about what internationalization means. First of all, the opportunity to reconceptualize the phenomenon of study. For example, when I visited the bilingual school in Argentina of Chinese Spanish in the middle of a lower income, that was very different than any bilingual school, and the understanding of bilingualism in that context was completely different. What are the reconceptualization of research methods when we think about this in international ideas or concepts? Informed consent in this country is very different than informed consent in Zimbabwe, maybe. And words like ethnography might have different shapes and understandings. And of course, the idea of university community relations that in this country are maybe an internship, that we consider an internship might be something completely different in another country. And by having scholars coming and going, these issues may connect to each other. Finally, this helps us rethink assessment, curriculum, or course offerings that we have in any university, which is part of the mission of any public institution or private institution. So now to the panelists, which is what really we're looking forward to hear. Question number 1, and each panelist is going to have 5 minutes to talk about that, is how do Fulbright programs in general serve as a catalyst for internationalization in general, not particularly when we talk about Hispanic serving institutions, but in general. So Dr. Filch, would you like to start?
Oh, sure. I would love to. So I've been thinking about this. David and I were talking about this a little bit last week, and I've been thinking about this question quite a bit. And the bottom line is, particularly with the Fulbright program, is that these are tangible and intangible differences, changes that are made. Part of the Fulbright application process involves talking about how you're going to bring the knowledge from being abroad back to your home institution. And so we do that in lots of formal ways. We do that with conferences, with presentations, all of these sorts of things. Articles, joint articles that you may do with colleagues from another institution. But I think I want to address some of the non-formal ways that this takes place, because ultimately this is an experience that will change your life. And I was thinking about it when I was a Fulbright in India. You have the regional conference with all of the Fulbrights, students and administrators and scholars. And someone gave a presentation in which he gave a quote by Ronald Reagan, or maybe by Ronald Reagan's speechwriter, I don't know, but it's such a beautiful quote. And so I thought that this is one way to kind of frame this way of looking at internationalization. And then I'm going to give you a really concrete example of what I'm doing connected to the Fulbright with my students here in Arizona and in India the day after tomorrow. So the quote is this: "There is a flickering spark in all of us, which, if struck at just the right age, can light the rest of our lives, elevating our ideals, deepening our tolerance, and sharpening our appetite for knowledge about the rest of the world. Education and cultural exchange provides the perfect opportunity for this precious spark to grow, making us more sensitive and wiser international citizens throughout our careers." Now, this is very focused on young people at the start of maybe their educational careers, but as we know, the Fulbright is also for administrators and it's for scholars, and I'm convinced that this spark can be lit at any age. And how then it manifests itself is another issue, because the Fulbright unfurls in unexpected ways when you're living abroad. You go with this roadmap of exactly what's going to be done, and then you find that takes detours, and those are serendipitous detours that lead to great exchanges and friendships that endure a lifetime. So here are a couple of concrete examples. With my students at the University of Arizona, based on my two previous Fulbrights, the one at the Chinese University of Hong Kong and also in Jawaharlal Nehru University in Delhi, I have, with my colleagues abroad, conducted joint classes or joint lectures in which our students are meeting each other and having the opportunity to interact. In many cases, this may be the first time that my students here in Tucson are having an international experience with their peers. And it's interesting in both cases, because you see, we are in both cases with Hong Kong and with the university where I'll be talking this Friday, we are in borderlands universities. This Friday, my students at the U of A will be joining me for a conversation with colleagues at the University of Garbhanga, which is in the borderlands with India and Bangladesh. So how then we will be having a discussion. We have the local and global. We have peers that are in sort of a similar situation, and yet, as David had pointed out, also with some radically different experiences. And in doing this, and doing it also with the students in the Chinese University in Hong Kong, what we are doing, going back to Reagan's quote, is planting that seed. How it will unfold remains to be seen. How it will manifest itself formally and informally in just the way it infuses every aspect of life. It will be very interesting, but we're planting that seed. And so basically that was what I wanted to say about that, David.
Wonderful, Melissa, you just on the dot. I'm delighted that Norma Gonzalez was able to join us from Argentina. So Norma, we'll let you catch your breath for a minute. And
I'm fine.
You're fine.
I apologize. I had connection problems, technology, but here I am.
We are delighted. This is one of the lemons that we can make lemonade out of it, that you from Argentina can be joining us in New Jersey. So the question number one again is, how do Fulbright programs serve as a catalyst for internationalization in general? If you could talk about this, Norma, I really will appreciate that.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to thank you and the university for organizing this panel and for inviting me to participate. Late, but honored. Thank you very much. So the Fulbright program, as you know, has a long history of contributing to build bridges between nations, contributing to promote better understanding between the peoples of different countries. In fact, we are celebrating our 25th anniversary this year. Nowadays, educational exchange programs are pretty well established everywhere. There are more than 6 million international students in different parts of the world. But in 1946, it was a pretty unique, very bold and visionary idea. And we are very, very grateful to the American government and the American people who have supported this program unconditionally for 75 years. In 75 years, the Fulbright program has awarded over 400,000 grants to citizens from over 160 countries. It has become a very prestigious program, well known all over the world. We have among our alumni 60 Nobel Prizes, 85 Pulitzer Prizes, many distinguished people in academia, the arts, politics, different professions, government, science. There is a very large network of Fulbright alumni all over the world, all of whom went through similar experiences, share common ideals, keep working together to help build a better world. Going back to your initial question after this presentation of Fulbright in general, Fulbright programs are an excellent catalyst for internationalization since every year they provide a very unique opportunity to 8,000 students, researchers, artists, professors from 160 countries to live and study abroad for a prolonged period of time, to participate in the everyday life of people in other countries, to understand other cultures and learn to see the world and themselves through the eyes of others. People tell us all the time that the Fulbright experience changed their lives forever, that they were never the same after this experience. They became more resilient, resourceful, creative, flexible, tolerant. They built personal and professional lifelong relationships. They had the chance to impact the lives of many others that came into contact with them during their stay. I am a living example of this. I was a history professor at the university from a small town in the province of Córdoba in Argentina. I had a 10-year-old son, and I had never been to the States. In fact, I hadn't traveled abroad a lot. And then I got the Fulbright scholarship and I could go to the University of Massachusetts, get my PhD. Well, this with my son, this clearly changed our lives forever. Today, I'm the director of the Fulbright program for Argentina. And my son is a doctor, he's an oncologist in the United States. So as you can see, Fulbright really changes the lives of people. Fulbright grantees are the real ambassadors of their countries, and they can help others understand their culture, their language, their history, see the world, as I said, through other eyes. We have this in mind when we select them. We will never choose someone who may be very bright, but will spend all the time by himself working in a lab or a library. We want the person who will work hard, but also try to get involved with people, build lasting relationships. In this sense, I particularly like the grants we provide for ETAs, English teaching assistants, who are young US persons who come to Argentina to help train the future teachers of English, and to FLTAs, foreign language teaching assistants, who are young Argentine people who go to the US to help teach Spanish at universities and colleges, since I believe they are the true ambassadors of our respective countries and they really represent the spirit of Fulbright. When teaching your language, you share a lot about yourself, your culture, and promoting better mutual knowledge and understanding is one of the main aspects of our Fulbright mission. So I think this is it for now. I don't want to take more time than was allotted.
You have 1 more minute if you want to use, Norma.
Okay, well, but I really want to go back to the question. I think Fulbright can be a really important way of acting as a catalyst. And I think particularly for, well, institutions like Montclair, it is very good to have access to these programs. We help. I mean, we always say Fulbright is not just money, it's becoming part of a network of a global network of students and scholars from all over the world, is having the opportunity to live in another country for a long period, which is very different from being a tourist. And so becoming involved with the people of the country, sharing the everyday life of the people in the country. So I think, and accompanied by Fulbright all the time. So it's a very unique and special experience.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Norma. Athena, the same question.
Yes, thank you very much, David, and to Melissa and Norma. How am I to follow those two fantastic answers to this question? I'm very happy to be here, and I'd like to thank you again for organizing this very important discussion about how Fulbright can be a catalyst for internationalization efforts. As was already described and beautifully illustrated by our previous speakers, the Fulbright program has a very rich tradition. We're celebrating our 75th anniversary this year, and as the flagship academic and cultural exchange program of the United States government, at its core is a very focused mission that centers around this idea of mutual understanding between peoples. So if you're to refer to the definition of internationalization that you had in your previous slide about community relations, of this overarching mission of what Fulbright is trying to accomplish, it's really the sense of giving people the opportunity to share their knowledge across communities, to be able to serve as cultural ambassadors, as well as academic and educational ambassadors to that country. But an important piece that I think we should also focus on in this discussion is what will be coming back home to the United States after these Fulbrighters have had these truly remarkable and transformative experiences. So in addition to this idea of developing relationships and forming community relations across different cultures and societies, upon their return, especially in the scholar program, which is the program that I primarily focus on, but definitely for student opportunities and teachers as well. Curriculum development was an important piece that you mentioned as part of internationalization in general. And Fulbrighters come back renewed, refocused, and rededicated to different disciplines and fields of study that they've been doing their work in, and inject that enthusiasm, that insight, and those new skills, not only in the particular field of study and work that they do, but also in cultural competencies. And as higher education institutions and society in general is becoming increasingly globalized, Fulbright is a unique resource in being able to facilitate these opportunities, grow that experience, grow that skill set, grow that knowledge base for communities around the world. And it's as one of the longest programs in existence at 75 years, as one of the largest programs that exists in the world, I think Fulbright has a truly unique role and voice in this larger enterprise of internationalization around the world. So in addition to building cultural understanding and competencies, I think a unique factor as well to the Fulbright program is the binational relationships that are established through Fulbright. So as Norma mentioned, the United States and Argentina has been partnering on this program now for 25 years. And so when you look at that, multiply that by the 160 countries that Fulbright is doing it is, that scope is in many ways truly a remarkable thing to look at over the span of these decades that the program has been in existence. I often refer to Fulbright on a college campus as the proverbial tide that lifts all of the boats due to its longevity, due to its vast network of over 400,000 alumni, due to the over 160 countries that we have relationships with and partnerships with. Fulbright relationships are in many ways the nucleus of a lot of other international partnerships. So students and scholars come back from their grants, and in many ways, the Fulbright tends to be a gateway for the other international opportunities and other ways of engaging with the international communities. But I would just end with this idea that internationalization goes both ways. So many of the wonderful experiences that our alumni have abroad that doesn't stop upon their return to the United States, and how we continue to talk about the program and how we can continue to look at the impact that the program has. I think that internationalization piece upon return is a very important factor to keep in mind, as well as to continue to celebrate too.
I was supposed just to move to the next slide, but I cannot do, I must say a few things. The idea of reconceptualizing borderline, for example, or planting the seed and having these online conversations across the world. And the issue that, you know, this is a personal and professional lifelong experience that changes your life. And the idea that this is binational and you share knowledge is something that is why I think universities should consider doing this in general. But now to the second question, which I think that is the million-dollar question is, how do Fulbright programs serve as a catalyst? How do Fulbright programs serve as a catalyst, particularly for Hispanic serving institutions? And I think that that is really what we are extremely intrigued by finding, you know, like what potential could this situation entail for all of us? So Melissa, would you like to get started with this one?
Yes, and this is something that I am absolutely passionate about, in part because when I served my Fulbrights in India and in Hong Kong, one of the things I realized is just how little people in other countries of the world know about diversity in the United States. So they have mass media images, they have our movies, they have television shows, but there's really not that much knowledge. And so I really see this, I feel like I'm kind of a crusader on this topic, because as I think probably I'm preaching to the choir here, but the United States is the country with the second largest population of Spanish speakers in the world after Mexico. And in fact, this is one of the fastest growing populations. We're now at 19%. As Hispanic serving institutions, you know, that is 25% of our student population. And many of these students, these Latinx students, are first generation students. And many of them perhaps have not heard of Fulbright. And so we need to really start making an effort to get the message out that this is an option for them in the future. And one of the reasons I say this is because oftentimes our Latinx students are less likely to have resources to study abroad when they're undergraduates at the university. And maybe they've never heard of Fulbright, so they don't know about this incredible opportunity in which they can be an ETA, or they can go on a research program. So it's incumbent upon us to get the message out. We have 411 Hispanic serving institutions in the United States, and this really represents the future of the United States. The demographics are changing radically in this country, and they say by 2045, the Anglo population will no longer be the majority, that the majority will be multi-ethnic and many Latinx. So it goes, as Athena was saying, it really goes in both directions. The rest of the world, I think, needs to have a better understanding of the United States, diversity in the United States. But our students also need to understand that their background actually puts them in an excellent position. Not only that, but their language skills, which open up the world to them. And so we've got to convey to our students, not only that, but also our administrators and our professors, because I don't want to leave that behind. One of the interesting things I was looking at when I was thinking about this question has to do with faculty, because you've got Hispanic serving institutions, but the question is, what is the percentage of faculty that are Latinx? At the University of Arizona, it's 9%. And so this is interesting. This is quite interesting. So we've got 26% Latinx students and 9% of the faculty. And so I think we need to get those numbers more on par as well, because oftentimes faculty members also are unaware of these sorts of opportunities that are available. So when I'm looking at this from the HSI perspective, I think we really need to capitalize and leverage our unique situation. And this is something that is throughout the United States. Obviously, HSIs are not only in the borderlands where I'm from, but we need to realize the future direction of the United States and how we can really capitalize on our situation as HSIs to get our students, our faculty, and our administrators to be applying for Fulbright fellowships, to come back and to implement at each of these different levels a greater international perspective. This is critical. So that is, I think, really all that I wanted to say about this. But I think it needs to be given much more attention. It's critically important that we pay attention to this now and that we develop ways of reaching out to the HSI student and faculty and administrative populations to convey to them why this matters. So that was all I wanted to say there, David.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Melissa. We're doing very good with time, so I'm really happy about that. But I think that this is the comments, and it's very important what we are talking about. Norma, would you like to take this question? And
definitely, yeah. Well, I totally agree with every single word Melissa said, and she expressed it very, very well. So I believe that increasing the number of Fulbright exchanges between Hispanic serving institutions and Latin American countries would be extremely helpful for both. First of all, by providing study abroad opportunities to people who are usually underrepresented in study abroad programs, at least in Argentina, and who are often first-generation college students. And as Melissa said, very often they are not aware, or they think they will not succeed, or they will not get the scholarship. So we have to encourage them, spread the word, help them write the applications. So I think, as Melissa also said, they would have the advantage of going to countries with a language that is already familiar to them. They would be able to learn the similarities and differences between their own cultural experience in the US and the host country's culture. Many of them, coming from Latin American families, might think that their cultures will be the same, but then they will discover the nuances, all the differences and similarities that make these cultures especially rich. Well, so they would be, as I said, able to make friends and professional relationships that will last for the rest of our lives. They will be able to study in universities that are very different from those in the United States. And this international experience will better prepare them to find jobs and to succeed in a globalized world. It's the same for the Argentine universities, because usually they don't have that many Latin American students, well, Hispanic American students, or they don't have, especially the smaller ones in the provinces, don't have access to hosting study abroad students. So it would be especially important for us to be able to make connections between Hispanic serving institutions in the States and our public universities in the provinces. In Argentina, we offer 1-year scholarships for US students who come to do a research project or an internship or take classes. And we also offer, as I mentioned before, scholarships to English teaching assistants who come for 1 year and we put them in different teacher training colleges all over the country. We try to put one in each province, and there they help train the future teachers of English. Well, so there are also many other study abroad programs sponsored by different US universities. And as Melissa said, it's not only for students, but we also have scholarships for faculty, and a Fulbright experience in Latin America can be very useful for faculty from Hispanic serving institutions. I was surprised when you said only 9% of the professors at the university are of a Hispanic origin. So this makes it even more important for them to have an experience in a Latin American country, because this would give them a better understanding and first-hand experience with the cultures and histories their students come from. Fulbright, as I said, is a life-changing experience, and this personal experience, this personal change will impact, as you said, Melissa, the way they teach, they do research, they relate to their students when they go back, and it will also help them develop educational exchange programs and research projects between their institutions and Latin American universities. So it's like we plant a seed and it has multiple effects and developments and consequences. We give 3 months scholarships to US scholars who come to teach and do research in Argentina. And we also have shorter grants from 3 to 7 weeks. And well, we had the honor of having David among our grantees coming to teach in Argentina. So, and as a result of this panel, I plan to develop a project to invite some representatives of Hispanic serving institutions to visit Argentina and talk with people from our universities, especially public universities in the provinces that, as I said, don't usually receive many American visiting students as professors as the ones in the big cities like Buenos Aires. So I would like to invite to bring some Hispanic serving institutions and organize programs in different regions of the country so they could meet with colleagues from Argentine universities, discuss potential study abroad and educational exchange programs, and establish links with colleagues from Argentina. So again, I believe there is a great potential for mutual benefit and development in this.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Athena, your turn.
Yes, thank you. So just to add on and amplify what the previous 2 speakers, Melissa and Norma, have said, HSIs and Hispanic serving institutions serve a very unique role in American higher ed and weaving the fabric of the educational system in the United States, and the Latinx communities for sure are a major thread in the story of what American culture and society is. So HSIs, by the nature of their work in educating that large population within our society, has a very important part to play in developing those skill sets, developing the students, and contributing to this larger discourse of education, both in the United States and abroad, or at least defining what that is for other people's understanding of what American higher ed is or what America is. So I think understanding that the key role that HSIs play is very important. And Fulbright, through our campus visits, our identification of institutions that we are seeing as might be continually underserved within the program, I think by naming it and identifying HSIs as a key audience in the work that we're doing is important. We have scholar liaisons appointed at institutions around the country, but every year as we develop those relationships, build out those networks, HSIs are at the top of that list, along with HBCUs, tribal colleges, and these other institutions that have this really unique role to play in terms of educating our students. To a point that Melissa made earlier, this wasn't originally part of something I wanted to talk about, but it's absolutely integral as well to understand, until we have Latinx PhDs and faculty to match the 25% of student populations in that, Fulbright can, not obviously to the same extent as somebody from those communities and that tradition and that tradition and that history, but Fulbright can help provide that insight, that experience, and that access to Latin American experiences, Latin American culture and exposures by Fulbrighters going on these exchanges, and then coming back to their institution with that greater level of insight and understanding of what some of those communities' experiences have been. So I think Fulbright can also serve as a catalyst in being able to fill that gap until there is a time in which the student populations mirror the populations, or I should say faculty, populations mirror that of what the student ethnic makeup might be across campuses in the country. I would also say specifically, like I know in one of the earlier discussions about this presentation, we were talking how Latin America particularly plays a part in understanding how HSIs and the Fulbright program can serve as a catalyst for that. So I wouldn't want to restrict necessarily Latinx communities to only going to Latin America, that there obviously is a very deep a deep exploration of legacy relationships and legacy ties that Fulbright absolutely is happy to celebrate and facilitate. So I think as we continue to reach out to organizations like HACU and ASI, the Association of Hispanic Serving Educators, like there is a way to continue to bridge that gap, to continue to open different doors, to have this larger understanding of how the Latinx communities, not only in the United States, but across the world, have really, can really be impacted and served through continued exchanges with other cultures and communities. In terms of partnerships and pathways to continued partnerships, Fulbright specifically highlights and actively seeks out relationships with HSIs in regards to both obviously outbound US students and scholars and teachers, but also inbound wise. We have two programs that I think are going to be of special interest to HSIs specifically, in addition to certain border awards and programs, of course, that exists within the program. But we have specific opportunities through the Scholar in Residence program, where we are especially seeking HSIs to host foreign scholars at your institutions to teach their courses and to engage with their community and to develop those relationships that many HSIs might not necessarily have. We're talking about some community colleges that might be also HSIs, but the Scholar in Residence program is specifically targeting HSI engagement, because these are the institutions that we want to, again, highlight and elevate to this level of uniqueness in the larger American higher ed arena. So the Scholar in Residence program, the Outreach Lecturing Fund as well. So we understand that not every institution is prepared to host a scholar for a semester or two, but if there are short-term engagements, how fantastic would it be to have a panel of speakers at an HSI speaking about issues that are related to Latinx communities around the world. This is something that the Fulbright program can facilitate, given the fact that, again, we have scholars in the United States, usually COVID aside, from representing about 140 countries. So being a great the Fulbright program can be a great convener for creative HSIs to engage with the larger, obviously, South American Latino world, but also engaging with the larger world and the way in which Latinx communities interact and move throughout different societies in the world as well. And Fulbright, given its size and scope, is definitely a means to accommodate and accomplish that.
Thank you very much, Athena. And again, now in a few minutes, Dr. Goodman, Alan Goodman, is going to be the discussant, but I cannot, help my time. I think that is very important, the issues that we are raising about self-selecting sometimes, or thinking that because we are an Hispanic serving institution, or because maybe we should not even apply. So I think that was a recurrent theme, and the reality is maybe it's the opposite. And and the other part, I think that we need to, the way that I frame this as what happens when minoritized communities are applying for very prestigious awards. What is happening? What is, other than the professional and personal effects, what are the effects for our science development when those groups that had been marginalized for a long time become part of those exchanges and conversations? So now it is the time that we have our panelist or discussant, Dr. Alan Goodman, who is going to be discussing the discussant of this particular part, and is really about what is the future of the Fulbright programs and their impact, a global, local perspective. So, Alan, your turn.
And David and Willard and all the panelists, thank you so very much for having me. I wouldn't change a word to what everybody has said. except maybe to say, I think we have a great Secretary of State, Willard. And his father was a member of our board. His spouse was the Assistant Secretary for Education and Cultural Affairs, in charge of the Fulbright program during the Obama administration. So I think there's an administration in Washington that, and she's now the Secretary of the Cabinet, there's an administration in Washington that has a profound understanding of the Fulbright program, its importance, its historic track record, and most important, what its goals are and what it wants to become. And I think we all share the goals that Melissa, David are talking about. We want Fulbright to be something that is for everyone, that everyone should have an aspiration to apply to it, that we should have the kind of applicant pools that, especially from HSIs, that Melissa, David, Athena are striving to get, and Norma in Buenos Aires would really like to place and host. So I think this is a very, very promising moment for Fulbright. Montclair State is a terrific partner for us in every endeavor. David has often briefed and led groups of Fulbrighters from all over the world, most recently Russia, when people were involved directly in this program. So Montclair State is an exemplary institution when it comes to wanting to engage in Fulbright, rescue scholars, protect artists, and generally show what the institution is ready to contribute in a regional level and in a national level. So we're, I think, at a very good moment to pose all of the questions that David has asked us to pose. And I would only want to make three additional observations to what the excellent panelists have said. One is, my email address is agoodman, all one word, @iie.org. Because I'm sure you in the audience will think of things we're not thinking about, not addressing, things we could improve, things we should try. And all of us at IIE would welcome hearing from you. And maybe the simplest and most direct and central way to do it is just email me, what could we do better? Secondly, I think our big challenge is to how do we close the belief gap? How do we close the perception that maybe this isn't for me? Maybe it's for somebody else. Maybe it isn't for our institution. And I think I have two suggestions here. One is that Montclair State already does this, and I'd love to see all HSIs do this. Make winning Fulbrights part of your internationalization strategy. Make Fulbright applications and success with applications be the way you define success in achieving your internationalization strategy. Because we know that internationalization strategies and foreign policies are just as important for universities as they are for governments. And if you don't have the strategy, the policy, and the metrics, it's going to be very difficult to get there. And I think encouraging people to apply for Fulbrights, winning Fulbrights is a key indicator of where you want to go and where you want to be in your own internationalization strategies. The second suggestion is this takes early identification on your campus of potential applicants to Fulbright and many other prestigious scholarships. You can't start early enough. You can't be encouraging enough. You can't guide people enough to imagine what their life could be if they were a recipient of a Fulbright. So encourage the imagination, encourage it early, and seek allies across the campus, professors, deans, provosts, consciously, directly ask them to be your talent spotters. Who do you think ought to be considering applying for a Fulbright? Who could we help now in their sophomore year that would have a real shot at this and should have a shot at this by the time they get to be a senior? And in that way, consistent with the focus of this convening, this is how we change the culture on our campus. And I think changing the culture is the key to success in Fulbright and internationalization. But this has been, you've had terrific observations from people, David, on the front lines of trying to make this happen. And I think my job is to work for Fulbright and also to respond to your emails, which I hope you'll send me when you see things that we could do more or better or ought to consider that maybe we have never even dreamed of. Because I want to imagine the kind of future for Fulbright that every one of the panelists is talking about.
Wonderful. Alan, is there any particular question to any particular panelist that you would like to follow up? I'm just asking that because I don't know if that's something that you would like to do now or later.
Well, let me reserve just a little time later. For me, these panelists have answered every question I might have had, and you couldn't have picked a better group to put together.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just to talk a little bit about maybe what is happening next, I'm going to tell you that I think that Dr. Katia Golfer is going to do this section. No? Okay, so this is the way that, I'm sorry, the way that you submit questions and answers. Please go to your questions and answers as features in the webinar. You go to the lower side of your screen and you have some questions and answers. And I do think that we have already a few questions that I'm going to stop the share. So we are going to be all the panelists together at the same time. And now is the time that I think that either Domenica or Marilyn are going to be asking the questions. Is that what we're going to be doing?
Hi, I'll go ahead and ask one of the questions. This comes from the Alejandra Carballo, excuse me. My university is not an HSI, but we are on our way and very interested to host more Fulbright scholars and students. Are there any programs we can apply to?
So
Shall I take this one?
please go ahead, Athena. Yes.
Hi, Dr. Carballo. Nice to meet you. Yes, the two programs that I briefly discussed, there's actually three that I'd like to call your attention to. The first was that Scholar in Residence program. Now is absolutely the year for any institution or any department to want to host a visiting scholar at your institution, because the Scholar in Residence program has opened up to wider audiences and larger numbers. So this is an excellent time to look into the Scholar in Residence program, and I can share my email and drop a link as well later in the chat. But this is an opportunity for your institution. It's host institution driven. So you would basically craft the type of scholar you would like on campus for teaching undergraduate or graduate courses for a semester or a full year. And then it would be up to you to tell us, you'd like us to restrict it to a particular part of the world. So you're looking for a Middle Eastern scholar, you're looking for an East Asian scholar, or you're looking for a Latin American scholar. And then we would take your application, work with our colleagues, similar to Norma's office down in Argentina, to launch the competition to seek a scholar to fit the needs and the program that you're intending to have on campus for that year. So this comes at a very little cost to your institution. So nothing to worry about on that end. And we are holding advising sessions practically daily with campuses that want to engage with us on this, because we know, unfortunately, at this time, we're not going to get every US faculty member or every US student abroad on a Fulbright at this point in time, but maybe in the next 75 years, we'll find a way to make that happen. But in the meantime, we can bring as many foreign students and scholars to the United States as possible to get that experience, to get that voice in your own classrooms, to encourage that participation in the program that way. So the Scholar Residence program for sure is one. If your campus is not quite ready to host somebody for a full semester or a year, the Outreach Lecturing Fund, it's currently virtual right now, but the Outreach Lecturing Fund would allow you to tap into visiting scholars who are already in the United States to visit your campus for 2 to 6 day short-term lectureships. So if you are a faculty member that would like to inject a little bit of international expertise or perspective into your courses, you can have someone come and discuss that. You can have them speak at International Education Week events, have them speak to any sort of conferences and consortia happening, symposiums happening on your campus. So the Outreach Lecturing Fund is a much shorter term way of engaging that. And some of our colleagues down in Puerto Rico, the Ana G. Mendez system down there hosts multiple OLFs throughout the year. Sagrado Corazon is also very active in bringing visiting scholars who are likely for obviously from other countries around the world, but might be doing their research in Austin or at Berkeley to come down to Puerto Rico to explore different parts of the United States, as well as again to share their knowledge with larger audiences from their primary host Fulbright institution. So those are two that I would quickly get on your radar. And third is the foreign language teaching assistantships. So the opportunity to bring native speakers to be teaching foreign language teaching assistantships on your campus also exists through Fulbright. And we're always seeking institutions for all three of those opportunities to engage with Fulbright, especially HSIs, but obviously not limited to only HSIs. So if you're working towards that accreditation to that level, we're absolutely willing and ready to engage with you now.
That was a very thorough answer. I think that the issue that maybe I will add to that, if possible, is the issue that when the students are making the application, to make sure that they talk about their bilingual abilities, the biliterate abilities, and that they understand the two cultures, and that they will be able to live in an international, in a bilingual setting, a university very comfortably. I think that that might be something that needs to be stated.
Oh, sorry, I was answering the question about bringing Fulbrighters to your institution. I didn't see, was there another question about the application process?
No.
Well, okay, thank you.
Melissa, you wanted to say something.
Oh, well, I just wanted to follow up actually with what you had said, David, that in all of the time that I am reviewing applications from students or even from my colleagues here, one of the things that always surprises me is that it never occurs to them to talk about precisely what you just said. They should mention that they are bilingual, that we do have a unique history, that this is important for the rest of the world to know about. And so lots of times they just look at me with a blank expression and say, but why should I even bring that up? See, it's not considered unusual or unique in any way. And so I have to say, okay, you've got to shift your way of looking at this and look at the broader picture. And what does the world need to know about the United States? Well, this is a huge part of the United States and our future. So I think it's really important that you brought that up. And anybody who's paying attention today, who's here at this event, I hope if you're applying for a Fulbright, you keep that in mind.
And Norma, would you like to, I'm just saying because you had this idea of maybe creating an HSI.
Yes, well, no, I totally agree with that. We use those programs a lot, the Scholar in Residence. The FLTA, as I mentioned, is for me one of the best examples of the Fulbright spirit, because these young persons that go to the States to teach Spanish are teaching a lot about their culture, themselves, who we are. So I totally agree that all these programs that were mentioned are specifically, could be specifically useful for this kind of institution, for Hispanic serving institutions.
Perfect. So I think that we have another question. And now we can go ahead.
We have a question from Diana Sanchez asking, I wonder what percentage of minorities are able to land a Fulbright, and what percentage of that number is Hispanic?
Do we have those numbers?
We do have a new fact sheet, and I think it would be good to circulate it to everyone on this. The increasing, it's striking that there's been quite an increase in minority applications and success to Fulbright over the past decade and a half, we all could do a lot better. We're all aiming to do a lot better. I don't have the fact sheet in front of me, but we'll make sure that you do.
Yes, so thank you, Alan. We're developing, we're finalizing, I should say, that fact sheet. So we'll definitely share it as
Okay.
it's available. A lot of that information is self-reported. So we're making sure that we have a large enough sample size to be able to make some statements in terms of what those numbers are looking like. So I will absolutely share that for follow-up after the call.
Thank you very much. Do we have another question?
Yes, the next question. I love the idea of identifying talent at the sophomore level. We see so many talented students who can be mentored. Is a mentoring program the way to move forward here at Montclair State so that we incubate that talent?
I find that maybe I would like just to say one or two things that we are trying to do that is very important. And this is thanks to all the people who are here, but we are identifying reference for each one of the colleges that could be like the people following, you know, because if you go for music or for education, it's not the same. And having a referent in each one of the colleges might be an important idea. And Domenica, who is one of the ladies who came up with this idea of even having some kind of a certificate that very early on, a professor could go to someone and say, you know, have you thought about applying? Here is my certificate, a recommendation for you to go for that program early on, just to, you know, push them to get started with that. So those are two concrete and very small ideas. But anybody, Melissa, in your university, any ideas that you're doing to start this earlier?
Yeah, I mean, the earlier the better, especially because as all of us know, the Fulbright application process is really detailed, and you've got to plan way in advance for exactly how you are going to be able to concisely convey what your project is all about, or what you intend to do, or who you are. If it's an ETA, for example, and you're talking about your experiences. At the University of Arizona, I think we have our U of A Global part of the campus, and throughout the entire campus, we are really actively, aggressively promoting Fulbright for both students and faculty. And as such, we've been actually among the leaders nationally for both scholars and students. This is just, like I said, in every class I teach, almost every lecture I even give, kind of going back to what Norma had said, it just impacts your entire life, and it becomes a part of what you're talking about, you know, and there's going to be some sort of a reference. And then I always say, please talk to me about this if you would like further information about what the Fulbright program could do for you. So I do that regularly, personally, but also we do it systematically at the University of Arizona. I assume that other HSIs do something along those lines. Again, it's a formal and an informal process. We're talent scouts, constantly thinking about who could benefit, and basically who couldn't benefit is the question, from having that experience abroad.
But Melissa, you also had like a wonderful idea that we discussed privately. So I'm taking the liberty to tell that maybe to do this in Spanish. You know,
Yeah,
like,
yes. Well, this is as I said, literally, we should be walking the talk. I mean, we are. This is part of our demographics. This is part of the United States, and I would love it. Specifically, Norma, thinking about your ideas, if we could do this panel and direct it at people in Latin America, talking about why they should be applying for Fulbrights into the United States, and what the benefits would be, and what potential connections we can make. We could do this entire panel in. Are you guys hearing that? Okay. Well,
that's okay. Go ahead.
We could do this panel in Spanish easily, and direct it outward, and go global with this, instead of just within the United States, and talk about what a rich experience it is. So I really hope, Katia was excited about that too, and David is excited. I really hope that we can do this. Take this show on the virtual road, globally speaking, and start sharing why this matters.
By the way, the person who asked that question was Ethne Swartz, who is one of our referents in the Feliciano School of Business. Norma, you wanted to say something?
Well, no, I totally agree with it. I like the idea of going all over, repeating this panel in different countries in Spanish. I have already told all my colleagues about this panel, so probably some of them are going to see it or later listen to the recording of it. So I agree that we should, well, mentor the students, encourage people to apply, help them. In Argentina, it's the same. People from the provinces, including myself, as I said, I come from a smaller town in Cordoba. And when I applied to Fulbright, I thought, I mean, there's no way I'm ever going to get this scholarship. And luckily I did apply, but many people just think they don't do it because they think everything stays in Buenos Aires, we won't be selected. And it's a lot of effort, as you said, because the application is complicated. It takes a lot of, it's very good also because it makes you think a lot about yourself, the important things that mark your life. It's when you start thinking of it, it seems very easy, but when you want to write it and in the number of words required, really takes a lot of introspection and thinking about the things that have been important in your life and transmitting that. I always tell the people who apply, imagine that we read 100, 200 applications and they are all more or less the same. So you really have to think about that makes that application stand out and catch the attention of the reader. So I think there's a lot of work that we could do, and especially going back to the Hispanic serving institutions among people that tend to probably disqualify themselves or people from the smaller provincial universities in Argentina. So I'm very excited about this, and I would really love to continue with this and bring people to Argentina to talk more about this with our universities.
I think that someone asked Norma if you can type your email in the chat, but
oh yes, absolutely.
That would be something. Another question?
Yes, we have a question from one of our colleagues here at Montclair State University, Teresa Fiore. I am currently focusing on an NEH project that embraces both Italy and Latin America. Memoria Presente. By the way, she has the link in the chat for anyone who needs it. How can the Fulbright program provide opportunities in different countries / continents for both students and myself as the PI?
I'm happy to take this one.
Go ahead.
So yes, there are opportunities. Are you, just to clarify, are you thinking of traveling as a cohort of students and faculty from a specific institution, or just generally as individuals? Traditionally speaking, Fulbright grants are given to the individuals. So as Norm pointed out earlier, Argentina receives numbers of US students and US faculty. There's the inbound side of that where they send Argentinian students and scholars to the United States. So yes, we have active programs in Italy for sure, as well as throughout Latin America. So that those linkages and those fellowships exist. I would refer you to our website for more information and the catalog of awards. That is sort of a blueprint of offerings that's given annually. But we definitely encourage the project that you proposed sounds fascinating, because I did allude to this idea of, multi-generational backgrounds and legacy returns to different countries and experiences. So I think Fulbright would definitely be a good match for continuing that work and finding opportunities to get students involved in those exchanges too. There was a statistic a few years ago. We asked our scholars how many of them have continued to either visit or take students from their home institution to where they did a Fulbright, and that number was at 83%. So as people continue to get their Fulbright grants, continue to build those relationships, many end up starting study abroad programs for their own campus. And again, just back to this idea that Fulbright is a gateway to many other opportunities to keep in mind. So I hope, good luck with your project, and hopefully there's a way to get Fulbright involved with the work that you're doing.
Yes, I wanted to say that too, that as I said at the beginning, we plant little seeds, but they continue to multiply. And we see very often professors coming back with groups of students or taking students to the United States. And we also forgot to mention that there is another little part of the Fulbright program that is administered by the Department of Education that is called the Fulbright Case program. And these are scholarships for people, for professors from American universities that want to come that want to go to other countries, but also for PhD students. And they also offer scholarships for groups. So for instance, right now we are going to do, when COVID allows us, we are going to bring 18 elementary and secondary school teachers to Argentina, and they are going to spend a month here, a month and a half, going to different parts of the country, visiting the schools, visiting the universities. So there is also this possibility of organizing like group programs to bring groups of teachers, also university professors. IAE also has an interesting program to bring administrators, groups of administrators, to visit countries and to establish contacts with local universities. So there is that too.
Wonderful.
And if I may, I'm going to some of the discussion I'm seeing in the chat. There are certain events that are happening in Spanish. So we have an alumni ambassador event that's taking place on Friday that, with your permission, David, I'll go ahead and drop if people are interested.
I shamelessly publicized this yesterday in your meeting, so you do that now.
But yes, one of our alumni ambassadors is doing a session in Spanish with Sagrado Corazon. So I would invite any of you who are continuing looking for more Spanish language engagement with the program to attend.
Thank you. That's really nice.
And I think having alumni tell their stories to starting out students, say sophomores, but have your alumni faculty or student say what it was like and what the process was like. It wasn't just filling out a complicated application. It started way before that. Will again spark that imagination that, well, maybe I could do this, or maybe I can find a mentor that will help me do it.
Can I add something to that?
Yes,
Because this is a really important point. And I know, David, you had mentioned this, and Norma also. And Norma, when you were talking about how many people just thought, well, I'm not even going to apply. Why should I? I'm never going to get it. It's a huge part of it, obviously, is being able to articulate who you are and what your project is about. But there's another very important part, and that is that people have to know you really well to write very convincing letters of support. And so our Latinx students, what I found is oftentimes are less inclined to approach their professors during office hours to say, hey, here I am, this is my story, these are my goals. And oftentimes, so there's a little bit of, so we have to really reach out to these students and to say, you know, come to see me and let's talk about your future and let's think about options for you. So that's part of it. But the other thing is that oftentimes, even if a student does, even if I manage to convince someone to apply, if they write to a professor and say, would you write a letter of recommendation for me? If they do not hear back, then they give up. And so I say, no, you do not give up. You do not give up. You don't know what the situation is of that professor. Maybe they had 100 emails that morning, you know, you can't take it personally. They say, well, I guess they don't like me. I guess they don't want to help me. And I say, no, you write again. And then you write again. And in worst case scenario, I said, you buy a sandwich and grab a book and you park yourself in front of the door to their office and you say, excuse me, can we talk about this? You've got to be really proactive. And oftentimes I find that my Latinx students are less inclined to do that. They say, I don't want to bother anybody. I don't want, and I said, no, you don't understand. This is part of our job as professors. We write letters of support, but to do that, we need to know you and we need to know you well. Otherwise it's going to be a generic letter, which is kind of like the kiss of death, you know? So.
Thank you. Next question.
I have a question. Do you have any thoughts on how the new Department of State travel advisories, which increased to a level 4 today for most countries, will impact Fulbright opportunities for the coming year?
We are looking at every country and every possibility. It will be different country by country, month by month. We have about over 2,000 American Fulbrighters as we speak in other countries, pursuing different parts of their program, even in the midst of this. So the best advice I have is to just stay tuned. We are defeating this pandemic. It's being every day gets sometimes a little better in different countries. We wouldn't ever want to send you a place where it would be unsafe, but it's going to require us watching it week to week from here on out.
Thank you. Any other panelists who would like to talk about that? I don't have any information. Norma, I don't know if you have some information.
No, well, I agree with Alan. I mean, it changes day after day from one side or the other. For instance, well, I see the light in the United States coming soon. So I think the September semester will be much better for everybody. And in fact, in spite of everything, we were able to send all the Argentine grantees, a lot of them, over 100 of them, to the United States this year to do masters, to do research as FLTAs. And I'm sure next year will be even easier. And to come to Argentina, unfortunately, well, the program was canceled for the Americans last year, and it's been canceled again this year because the situation is still very unstable. I think vaccination will be the answer to many of these things. But till that happens, as Alan said, we'll have to watch day by day and make sure we protect the grantees and we don't expose them to complicated experience, especially because going back or moving from one country to other has become complicated. So, but all this will change, hopefully soon.
Hopefully. Okay, another question?
Yes. We have a question coming in from Diana. She is interested in learning more about the 3 to 7 week teaching grants available in Argentina. Is there a website that we can throw into the chat?
Yes, I will write the website, but yes, you have to apply through IAE. So IAE has all the information on the IAE page. They have the grants for scholars, and the selection is done in the States. All the application process is done in the US through IAE, and you have to apply through IAE. So I'll write our web page, but you also should look at IAE's page. And there are, as I said, grants for people to come for 3 months to teach at an Argentine university, and shorter grants for that we call specialists, that people to come from 3 to 7 weeks also to teach.
Perfect, thank you. Another question?
Yes, here's a question. My campus has a 90% Hispanic population. We have never provided a presentation about Fulbright. What do you recommend to do to start the conversation with students?
Give us your address. Tell us when you'd like us to show up. It's a lot easier sometimes doing it these days by Zoom, but we'd welcome the chance to have that.
Absolutely. I was just going to, I can drop my email address here. Let me know what date and time works for your campus calendar and campus community. And myself or one of my colleagues would be more than happy to engage with your campus.
Yeah, and I was, sorry, excuse me, Athena.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to say the same thing. I am trying to think of 90% HSIs. I'm thinking maybe UTEP. If it's UTEP, it's just 5 hours by car from Tucson. I'll get in the car now and drive over there and talk to anybody you like at university about applying for a Fulbright. You've got this whole panel of people. We're all so excited to be able to talk about this with your students.
And as we said before, I think the most useful part is engaging alumni, because alumni are living examples of the experience. And well, for instance, as I say, I am from Córdoba. So the fact, when I go to talk to the universities in the provinces, the fact that I am also from a province makes them feel, oh, she could do it, why can't I do it? So I think involving the alumni and having them tell about their experiences is the best way to encourage people to apply and to help them to do so.
I think that they're telling me that we have our last question. Is that correct, Marilyn?
That's correct. And that question is, what would be the best program for PhD students who are bilingual / multicultural, for example, Mexican American?
I think it's important to figure out, especially with Fulbright, where it is you want to go. Because it's a binational program, all of the awards are organized by country. So think about where you want to go and what field you want to go in. And that's the beginning of researching which region, which set of countries, what specific awards they offer. And I defer to Norma, Athena, and Melissa to correct me if I've left something out.
No, I totally agree. And IAE's webpage includes absolutely everything. So it's a very good way to find the best scholarship for you.
Wonderful. So I think that we're getting into the concluding remarks. First of all, I would like to thank all of our panelists and for being so open and so wonderful and so excellent. But now is the time that John Bader, Dr. Bader, will be giving his closing remarks, and we'll go from there.
Well, thank you very much, David. I want to thank everyone on this webinar for an extraordinary conversation about the Fulbright program and its opportunities, particularly for Latinx communities. It's always a joy to be with Alan, Athena, Norma, many of my friends from IIE. This is a shared mission and a shared community, and the Fulbright Association, which is the alumni organization based here in the United States, is delighted to partner with institutions like Montclair State and with our friends overseas and at IIE. I thought I'd conclude not with trying to summarize all the extraordinary insights shared today, but to leave you with a couple of thoughts that I hope will provoke further conversation among you and your colleagues in the coming days. The first is related to our 75th anniversary. As has been noted a couple of times, the Fulbright program began in 1946, and therefore 2021 is our 75th anniversary. At a moment like this, it's a good time to reflect on the meaning of this program, its impact, and its future. Alan has offered a number of excellent thoughts, and I'd only add to this with asking sort of two questions. Are we advancing the mission, and are we built to advance that mission? And by that, I'm of course referring to all of us who contribute to the Fulbright community. This is not owned by any one person or institution. The mission, it seems to me, is one in which we are using education and international exchange to promote respect, cultural understanding, peace. We are fighting xenophobia. We are fighting prejudice. We are trying to create generation after generation that believes that humanity is united by so much more than divides us. And this is an incredibly important mission. It always has been. But right now, as the world is isolated and divided, and both by tribalism and by pandemic, we really have to think about how deeply committed we are to these missions and whether we're executing them effectively. I would argue that we are we're doing well, but we have so much more that we could do. There is so much work that we could accomplish together if we work together, if we respect each other, if we listen to each other. So I would ask you to think about mission. The second is, are we built for advancing the mission? And a lot of good reflection is going on right now, in part because we're stuck at home. Many of us, here I am in my son's bedroom. This is not my office in Washington, but it gives me time to think about whether we're doing the job we can do and how we could do it better. I would urge my colleague IIE, for example, to challenge themselves on the selection process. How is it that these applications are managed and considered? Are we looking at the right qualifications? Are we thinking about the ambassadorial qualities of Fulbright applicants in the full display of those qualities? Many times our selection committees tend to replicate themselves. So they're made up of academics who are looking for people who are just like themselves. They think like themselves. They're as qualified as themselves. And that can result in excluding populations and perspectives that deserve a careful consideration. Particularly those people who have incredible leadership qualities or great charisma, or would be amazing representatives of who we are overseas. And yet they may not have all of the research qualities or the high grades or the perfect language scores that many people have. So I think we need to challenge ourselves in thinking, well, who is qualified to be a Fulbrighter? And will they therefore be able to advance the critical missions of peace and understanding and respect? I would also urge you to think about the question of whether this is a prestigious award or just one that should enable the mission. I think we talk too much about the competition. We intimidate people who may be interested. Norma tells the story of her several times. She made reference to the fact that she didn't think she'd be qualified to do this. And yet Norma is one of our superstars, okay? She's a treasure, a jewel. And yet there was something in her thinking that said, I can't pull this off. This is not something that I deserve. Well, that's somewhat our fault, those of us who are stewards and trustees of this scholarship and this brand, to oversell that and say, the best of the best, when the fact is we're looking for good people who will advance the mission. And I think, again, a reminder of the mission is important. Finally, I would say that there are not enough seats at this table, right? I mean, this is a huge problem. Alan and I and our respective communities and institutions spend a lot of time talking to the US Congress about expanding funding for this program. And one of the main reasons why we do this is to set more seats at the table so that more people can represent their respective countries and their respective communities. We need your help in that. You need to speak to your members of Congress and ask for continued increased funding for Fulbright. That is absolutely important. But remember that even if we were to, increase it by 50%, that would mean only 12,000 Fulbrighters at any given time, which would be fantastic. But there are literally billions of people on this planet. So the question is, how can we expand the impact in a way that engages all of our communities, not just people who win the Fulbright grant, but people who could benefit from it indirectly? And this is where I'll mention in my final 30 seconds, the importance of community outreach done by universities, by commissions like Norma's, like programs like ours, we call Fulbright in the Classroom, where Fulbrighters go to communities, either digitally or in person, to talk about the countries that they know and love and can teach about. let's share the international with everyone, not just people who are applying to or winning Fulbrights, but everyone who deserves to have a global perspective. So I want to thank you all for letting me speak today. I congratulate you on a terrific event, and I'm delighted to be in such good company.
Thank you very much. Katia, you have the closing remarks.
Thank you. Well, my feeling is we have made the world even smaller today. This is part of what we have been able to use the technology to help us. I feel that this, I believe, and I know that this event only strengthened the intentionality of the work we do and the work that should be doing. Thank you all for joining us. Special thanks to our distinguished guests and panelists. Thank you to my colleague, Dr. Schwarzer, and thank you very much to Domenica Dominguez and Marilyn Moya from being behind the scenes and helping us. Until the next time, muchísimas gracias y nos vemos pronto.
Gracias, hasta luego.
Ciao.
Ciao.